Good afternoon and welcome back to Parliament Street. 45 years ago, the nation was embroiled in the most historic political campaign of its life. Only 10 days into 1967, Bahamians would see for the first time what would become known as majority rule as the Progressive Liberal Party wrested control of the government out of the hands of the United Bahamian Party. This is Patti Roker. My guests today, UTEB and NCTU President Jennifer Isaacs-Dotson, Shalita Colley, Chairperson of the PR Committee for the NCTU, and David and Rosalie Fox, the son and daughter of a man without whom there would have been no majority rule. And they're celebrating 45 years of majority rule with an educational campaign targeted at young Bahamians to help them understand the significance of this anniversary and the event it commemorates. How has the nation changed since 1967? And how has the labor movement benefited from the majority rule state of mind? Is the Bahamas in danger of backsliding to those dark days before majority rule, or are we on a safe course to the future? We're going to talk about those things. And here we are back on Parliament Street after a couple of weeks off for the holidays. I hope you enjoyed your holidays. Anyway, it's good to be back, and it's good to be back with this show because, as you know, history is one of my passions, and this is a very historic. Actually, this whole week has been historic for us with the passing of Sir Clifford. Of course, it caused Bahamians to terrible. Somebody got to die before Bahamians learn about something, but a lot of the younger generation, I think, probably heard the name Sir Clifford Darling for the first time. But anyway, and some of the older generation got reminded of some of the things, some of his accomplishments, which are all tied in with what we're talking about today as well, because that was his first election, 1967. But you know what I'd like to really, really do? I'd like to, because you guys were here on January 10th. I don't know how old you were, 1967. Were you born? You weren't born. That's okay. You were born.
I was around.
I'd like to. No, I'd really be curious in because you were kids, and I'm sure I'm imagining. And what was your recollection? Did you know there was excitement going on, Jenny? Did you?
No, I have no recollection.
None. Okay, you were little. That's okay. You didn't, because sometimes kids absorb things. But Rosalie, you must have. You must have. Yes. In your family, I imagine you knew about politics and things political from a very young age.
Well, first of all, I came up in a very happy household, and it was only in later life that I learned that there was all this controversy swirling around my dad and his activities. But somehow both he and my mother kept that away from us totally, and we had a very happy childhood. I have no recollection of Dad discussing politics with us or explaining his activities to us. He was very much a family man. Our time was spent going up to the Fort Hill. Both sets of grandparents lived on the Fort Hill. Yeah. And my father's mother, every afternoon around 3 o'clock, she and her husband, Mr. Edward Fawkes, they would come and sit out on the porch at about 3 o'clock, and they would just wait for people to pass by and come and sit and have a chat. And then religiously at 7 o'clock, he would go inside to listen to the news. And of course, Dad, his focus with his children was music. And he was very much insistent upon all of us learning to play a musical instrument. And so both he and my mother, they chauffeured us back and forth from one end of the island. Our music teacher lived in the east, and you all the way to Johnson Road.
And where you live was
on John F. Kennedy Drive.
Serious countryside.
But they never complained, and they drove us back and forth, sat outside, just waiting patiently. So I have no recollection of politics prior to 1967, but
what did you
67.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yes, it all came alive. That was a very, very exciting time, and that's when I truly had an understanding, of what was going on in the country. And 1967 for me was one of the happiest years of my life. You know, my father was a parliamentarian prior to that, but in 67 he became a cabinet minister, and our lifestyle changed. We had parties, we had soirees in the home. We started traveling with him to New York, the Family Islands, and so forth. And so it was a different kind of life. But there was immense joy and jubilation, and that lasted for the entire year that he was a cabinet minister.
Did you have any kind of sense of the great triumph of this whole thing and the part your dad played in it?
You know, as the years go by, I somehow I feel I don't look at 67 as just an event. To me, it's a miraculous event. Because, as you know, he was the lone Labour candidate. And Dad was very much a part of the struggle. But, of course, he was heading up the trade union movement, and he was dipping in and out of the PLP. And, of course, there was the United Bahamian Party. And I personally feel that God allowed that tie to happen, 1818, because if either side had gotten a clear majority, this man who had given so much, made such a contribution, he would have been left out entirely. So
true.
I really think that this was a miraculous, divinely orchestrated event. Yes, so that when this black majority came into power, he would be a part of it. Otherwise, had it not happened that way, he would have been left on the outside. Yes. So I can't say that all of that came to me at the time. But in later years, that is how I understood it to be.
Were you aware of the part he played at the time? I mean,
yes, I understood all of that.
You were aware of the both sides wooing him, and
yes, because they talked about it. And my mother, she always had the recollection of Sir Rowland Simonet calling. You know, at the time, his office was situated on Wolf Road, the House of Labour. And he had an office on one side of the corridor, and she had an office on the other side. And apparently when that call came in from Sir Rowland Simonet, she answered the telephone. And he asked to speak at that time to Mr. Fawkes. So she went and she alerted him. And she said she never hung up the telephone. So she said that she heard Sir Rowland say, "Name your terms." Yes, so they always talked about that. Yes, because sometimes people ask me, "Is that true? You know, was he really asked to name his terms?" Yes,
I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm sure. That's why you know, and I hope one of the lessons that young people, which is the NCTU's thrust in bringing this to the fore right now with an exhibition and everything, one of the lessons that young people, young voters, get from this is that elections can be very, very close.
Yes.
Very close. And sometimes, you know, sometimes you don't have to win the majority to make the decision. You know, and I tell these young people in these new parties, you know, 6 seats. You could be running things, you know. 1 seat,
right,
you know,
yes,
obviously was tipped the balance, and it's not unheard of. Look at, I mean, Elizabeth was what, 3 votes, 4 votes, something like that.
Yes,
had to go to court.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
right down to the wire.
People are very, very. It's a real hard thing to call right now, and this is a case in point. When they say, "Oh, a tie could never happen," I go, "Hello, remember 1967? Hello." And even the last election was close. So it's important that people take a lesson from this.
And I think a lot of people never understood the role of A.R. Brennan, you know, because now people say, "Oh, both of them joined the PLP."
No,
now, Alvin Brennan, if you got The Guardian, some days after January 10th, 1967, he maintained that he was an independent.
Absolutely.
He accepted the post as a speaker. All right, and so.
And your father didn't join the PLP?
No, it was a PLP Labour coalition government.
There's that word.
Yes, right. Yeah,
And
the
A.R.
coalition.
Brennan was, yes, they do
yeah.
forget him.
And I think what is happening in the country today, and this isn't happening, among those who are unlearned or who don't know, but you have persons who ought to know better, who are stating that the PLP won the election in 1967. Yes, and it didn't happen that way.
The PLP, if you will, created the more attractive the more attractive offer to your father and to A.R. Brennan, whatever the offer was, even if it was just a matter of being who they were and the other side being who they were. And that is, what your father and A.R. Brennan gravitated towards. I don't think A.R. Brennan was happy with the UBP. I think that's a matter of record in any instance. And the PLP was just the more, at the time, more attractive option.
Yeah, Patty, if
Pull
I,
us over to you,
yes,
please.
Patty, if I
David,
may
yes.
interject a bit.
Speak into the mic.
That's a
From my
good big sister.
understanding of events,
You can pull it right towards you, don't
yeah,
There you go.
the UBP offer was the more attractive in that it was to name his terms.
Yes,
right?
but we're
On a
not talking
financial
about.
aspect.
We're not talking about. I'm not talking about what was attractive to in the cold in a vacuum, but we're talking about that man, your father. What was attractive to him,
Right.
and to his soul.
Yes, it was attractive that the workers of the country would now be in charge of the country and have a voice. That was attractive. But
Exactly.
because I'm younger, I was 7 at that time, and I'm, I would say, part of a more material generation.
Yeah.
When you say attractive,
Yeah, yeah.
for younger
Yeah,
persons,
yeah,
we
yeah.
normally think of money.
Yes. No.
And other things.
I'm glad you clarified it because
Yeah.
I don't mean that sometimes an offer isn't just about monetary gain. It's about something you can go to sleep at night peacefully having done, and it isn't always about money. And
Agreed.
I think that they looked at what the PLP was and what the UBP was, and these two men made their decisions. And
I
the rest
don't
is
know
history.
if he would have considered the UBP offer attractive at all, because
No matter how
they
much.
represented everything that he had fought against, you see? So it never would have been attractive. And one thing about Sarandel is I don't know if people realize this, but Sarandel was not about materialism. Wealth, riches meant nothing to him. Had he not married a woman like my mother, I really don't know what would have happened, because she was the more practical one, and she was the one that kept the home together. And after, she had to take control of the finances. So if he had intended to lure him with money, that was
know
the
him.
wrong. No, he didn't know him.
He didn't know him.
He didn't know
know
him.
him.
Yeah.
No, and what they had been through with the labor movement,
With the Burma Road and
with Burma Road,
and with
Yes.
the general strike.
general strike.
That did not, I'm sure, was a bitter pill and didn't
Yeah,
help the UBP.
not
with
in
him
his
making a
eyes.
decision to join them. I
Yeah.
think those two events
Yeah.
were very critical in his decision.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think when you talk about attractive offers, people have to understand that sometimes there are things more attractive than money.
Money.
It's
Yeah.
called
Exactly.
principles.
Integrity.
But one thing I wanted to point out as
Yes.
one of the beneficiaries of that decision, one more that's an independent baby. But what I would like to say, this shows how important character is. Because the question that comes into my mind, the more I learn and the more I read, how much of today's politician, given the weight of the decision that had to be made, would make that same choice. When he said, name your terms, he said there are no price and there are no terms. And to think of what he could have asked, what he could have financially gained, to him to have that type of character, the type of foresight to see so far into the distance to see that one day persons like myself can benefit from things would be better for us. How many of them are so altruistic that they'll say, I will deny myself for the greater good of all. They're not that altruistic, in my opinion, they're not that altruistic. And I think today, going into our general election, this is almost a funny situation because we have three parties going at it neck and neck. We have a very young and charismatic leader in the third party. We have similar situations that happen in the general strike in terms of if you look at the road project where the workers are saying they are paid differently.
Boy.
And there's a foreign company in.
It's Burma Road
Right?
all over.
It's all over again. And then you have the difference is now the political parties in are the ones that look more or less like us. And the ones who are on the outside that say, well, it's now us who have to decide who is going to make the best decision for all of us. And now that's a critical point because we could end up in that same, it's almost like it's come full circle. And it can end up that way. And for example, if it were that, let's say, for argument's sake, nobody shoot me on this, if that were to come to that decision and it were Branwell, McCartney, or one of the independents who are running, can we as a nation have that type of surety that they have the type of character who will say, I will make the best decision for the country and not myself? Do we have that type of leadership today? That's the question I'm asking us.
We don't even have that type of rhetoric. You know? No, I'm serious. They talk about what's good for the party and what's good for hello.
The country.
What about me?
Yeah.
You know,
And the people.
Exactly. And also I think that today's politicians need to remember what we just said a few minutes ago. Sir Randall never joined the PLP. Mm-hmm. If he retained who he was and remembered who he represented, and he was a Labour MP. Mm-hmm. And
May
I wonder
say
if
something, though? My recollection of Dad, all along, he was in and out. He would no sooner join than he would be out again. So I think that pattern sort of went right on through up to 67.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
But in 67, it would have been.
He was a Labour candidate in 67.
It would have been natural for him
and
to become a
his time
PLP.
with the PLP, any time he joined, was always very short-lived, very short-lived.
But what comes to mind with me too, if you're looking at what happened with the general strike on Burma Road, we're looking at also the politicians, but then we as individuals have to accept some responsibility too. So Randall, so Clifford, and all those from that generation could only have done what they did because of how unified we were as a people. Some of us aren't willing to accept any amount of discomfort. We aren't willing to sacrifice. I mean, the general strike lasted, 3 weeks? They had to feed them. They had to sacrifice. The whole family went to the park. The whole family did without. Whole communities galvanized themselves. We are now so
spoiled as a nation.
You're right, and we are so me-central. I can't accept the discomfort of marching on a parade because I don't want to sweat to mess up my makeup. I don't want to march on a parade to sign up for something that's right because I don't want my political whatever see me and whatever favor I would have gotten from them, I would no longer be able to ask. I don't want to be seen marching because we're elitists now. That's something those people do for those types of people. I'm not that type of people. So now we as individuals are looking at the politicians, but remember the politicians came from us. They are members of this community. And if we are looking at what is going on, we ourselves have become too selfish, too materialistic, I beg to say a little bit too greedy. We don't want to put ourselves out there. We don't want to stand up for anything, but we are willing to benefit from it. So but we want to benefit, then someone else pays the cost. We're not willing to sacrifice. We're not willing to ask Madam President if she will to organize something. They'll come to and say what they need. They'll come and say what she wants. They'll say, well, could you X, Y, Z? Well, it always that long well.
Yeah.
There was no well then,
No, none.
And they didn't benefit. They had to sacrifice so much.
In somebody said, and I can't remember who it was on the show, somebody said that they believe it's more difficult now to organize something like that because people have more to lose. In those days, they didn't have anything to lose. I mean, they had a family and they, and if they lost their job, somebody, would help them. Generally speaking, it was a tighter-knit community.
In the Burma Road ride, they had their lives to lose. People actually lost their lives.
But the general
if the
strike,
father lost his job, the mother didn't go, the whole family would collapse.
The general strike, what really amazed me the most when I did the research on it was just before the general strike, the weather, there was what they called a hurricane here in January. All the boats in the harbor were wrecked. It was a terrible weather phenomenon. And from the 12th of January, which is the first day of the general strike, all the way to the 31st, they gathered every night at Windsor Park.
Yeah,
and I can tell you, because I researched it, the weather was terrible. it was freezing cold like it was last night. It was rainy sometimes, but they came. And I thought to myself when I was doing this research, would they do that today? But they
Yeah, but the
came.
problem is, Patty, I think what Shalita is saying is quite right. But the question is, yes, we have what we think we need right now, but in the long run, as a country, are we selling ourselves out to who? What are we prepared to gain in the long run? Because we will end up losing so much when we don't stand for something. And that is the problem that I see. I've been criticized when I said that people didn't come out and support the march that we had recently, and I was criticized and called all kinds of names. But I say to people, you call the talk shows, you say these things. They said they supported Patelco. They didn't want Patelco to be sold. But when the call was made, where were you? Did you answer the call? And that's an important question that Bahamians, and particularly young Bahamians need to ask themselves, if we don't stand up, what will happen to us?
See, I think people believe that the work that was done by Sir Randall and Sir
will
Clifford
continue.
and Sir Lyndon and all
Right.
of
The
those,
struggle
that whole
continues.
It
cadre,
will not continue.
it overcome is not a past tense.
Exactly.
It is a constant effort.
But-
You cannot stop. You must be vigilant.
You must be vigilant.
Because it can be taken away from you, and probably as we speak is being taken away
away
in
from
small
you.
ways.
Aaron Ferguson
We
was
don't
on his
know.
talk show the other night talking about something, and I made my oldest grandson, I said, sit here and listen.
Who was that?
Aaron Ferguson.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I said to my
Oh.
oldest grandson, sit here and you listen to
listened
this
to that
hear
show.
that.
because you need to hear this.
I did hear that. That was when he had a pile of books next to him.
Yes.
Right.
I did hear
And he
that,
had
and I
all
was
the
I
like,
made him
books
sit
there.
there, and
I
I know
would-
he
I
was
couldn't
angry
move.
with me, but I said, you sit here because
Yes.
you need to hear
Yes.
what this young man is saying because it is relevant and you need to know.
yes.
And I said to him, sit here and listen to this.
What I'd like to say, I think the revolution that occurred, leading up to 67, it followed the pattern of the French Revolution. And if you think about the French Revolution, you had a very large working class, a smaller middle class, and then you had the gentility that controlled the wealth. And when they had the revolution, it was led by the professional class, the middle class, but supported by this very large, they call them the proletariat, this very large working class. And one thing Dad told me that I never forgot, he said the battle in the 50s and 60s was fought by the working man, and the middle class people reaped the benefits. And when Dad went around, he allied himself with the garbage collectors, the stevedores, the longshoremen. Middle-class people did not support him. In fact, they cursed him out. Every night, Satin DePuch, would feature him. Scathing attacks in the newspaper. And my mom always tells me about a very prominent person in the community who said to her, Jackie, what is Randall doing associating with these people? And this is why when we put out this, there will be a supplement coming out. There will be a supplement coming out on Tuesday.
Oh, good.
And
Excellent.
it's going to be a salute to the working man.
Excellent.
Because people think, you hear the name Pendling, the name Forks, but you had this band of poor working laboring masses, all
and
right?
not, and may I just
Yes.
interject, they were not all black.
Yes.
There were
Okay.
there were poor white people also, because I've had many people come and say, that wasn't just black people that voted
Yes.
in 67 for
Right.
the PLP. I can remember my mother, my father, whatever.
See, and so what I'm calling for, we need a history that is more inclusive, all right? Okay? And so we have to stop talking about the power elites, and we have to think about the mass of Bahamians that made this possible. We must not forget them. They're a nameless mass.
Oh.
But I remember some of them. Sister Flory, Cousin Johnny, Brother Maxwell Taylor.
They have
Yes.
wonderful stories. I
Yes.
tell people all the time when I said, quote unquote, little people say, "Oh, I don't have a story." I say, everybody who lived through this time has a story.
Yes.
You
And
were here, you lived it.
these were the people that surrounded Sarandel, all right? These uneducated persons. And they called him Moses. People say it was Pendling, but they first started calling Fox Moses. And Sarandel writes about that in something that I will share with you a little later on, you know. And
But now,
they
as the
gave
middle
him
class,
support.
therefore, along that premise, as the middle class has grown, and there isn't as much of a working class for the middle class to inspire. So is that why we don't have, you know? Because Sir Clifford once told me that he was one of the marshals in the street for Black Tuesday.
Yes.
And I said to him, and I said to Sir Lyndon, how did you get the people out? And how did you get them to behave? And he said, because we told them to come. And when we told them to go over the hill to Southern Recreation Grounds, because they were reading us the Riot Act on Black Tuesday, they went. Because they trusted us and they knew we had their interests at heart. And today, this is just unheard of. You couldn't, the only thing I remember in my time here that came close to that is when Leonard Archer led the teachers onto Bay Street in the 80s.
Yes.
Because I remember because I was on Bay
strike.
Street watching that. And that was a big thing.
That was a big thing, yeah.
But that was the last, pretty much.
Big, yeah.
But I
The
think
last
what has
big
been
thing.
happening of late in this country, from my perspective, is we've been running away from ourselves. We want to say we've educated ourselves, we've gotten a certain level of affluence, and then we want to move away from the way we were or the way we were raised, the extended family, the community. We want to make sure we don't live over the hill anymore, so we don't want to be associated with that type of people, and to be aligned with that is to label ourselves a particular way. But what I see going on now, you spoke of the young people, and I look at the pictures from the general strike, and I wonder if the young men who walking around here letting everyone know if they wear Calvin Klein or Fruit of the Looms underwear, all young girls who want everyone to see their tattoos show. Look at that pictures and read and see how those young men and women stood up. They were willing to accept whatever came that day, and they stood in front of those stores, didn't go in, stood with those placards, and they stood strong for days, for weeks on end. And I'm looking at us now with all of our cell phones and all of our material possessions. Our bellies are full, like a song says, but we're starving because we have not passed on that pride, that connectiveness, that inclusiveness. And for some reason, that is probably what has been lacking in the ingredient in our community. It has to be a connection, a pride, somewhere where we know this is who I am, this is where we stand, and this is our line, the sign. And no one crosses that. But what we're doing now is every time something comes, we keep backing back, and we are at the ledge now. They're saying we don't have any struggles anymore. We have worse struggles now. We have struggles of indifference. We have struggles with lost morality. We have struggles with poor education. We have struggles. I came up over the hill. I grew up on East Street. My grandmother's house was on Market Street, and she liked to say she's from Market Street. She's from Farm Road. But I always knew where I was. And I always knew who my people were. And if I walk in the street, people wouldn't call me by my name. My mother married a call, but they'll always say that wood girl. They say, well, I can tell you, Grammy. They'll say, they don't know you, Ma, but I know you're one of them wood girls. And I knew when I walked in that community, whatever I do, all those old ladies sitting on the porch,
they report.
they will have before I reach home, the news will be to my grandmother. So, and I knew I wouldn't want to do anything that would embarrass her.
Yeah.
I had to carry myself a particular way. I knew I had a responsibility to myself and my community. And even now, as a shop steward, maybe a young shop steward, but when I have to step out, the reason I'm on the show today, because Miss Dodson, they carry me now for a reason.
Yeah.
And I have now a duty to listen. Sometimes as young people, we're so arrogant and full of self-importance. Sometimes we have to learn to listen, to accept the lessons of the past, and we have a responsibility now to carry it forth. And what we have to do is learn. That is why we have the supplement. We're so grateful for the Foxes helping with the supplement. The exhibition is being postponed to another time because we're going to try to carry this throughout the year, because our campaign this year, we're focusing on education, because like you say, we, as the trade union movement, have to tell our story. We've been relying on others to do that for us. And like I said, we have all the mediums available now.
Big mistake.
And we have a responsibility to all those men and women, those nameless faces from the Burma Road riot, those nameless faces in the general strike who went without, who were hungry, those men who died, all those people in the salt mines way from Inagua coming forward to working at the lumber mills in Grand Bahama, all those persons who suffered through the years. We as labor leaders have a certain responsibility to the poor, to the oppressed, to the downtrodden, to stand up. I keep telling people, they try to look at labor workers and unions today and say, well, all those are troublemakers. No, I tell people, unions are here to protect the human rights of workers, and we are there to stand in the gap for those who are vulnerable. And if you want to look down on us, I say, I want you to check our history and show me where we have gained in this history of the Bahamas, and you can't find the benefit or the efforts of the trade union movement from the general strike, from the Burma Road riot, even all the way up to independence. You see, the politicians jumped on the labor bandwagon and rode it straight into history.
Oh, yeah.
And we have sat by.
77, that concordance thing.
Okay, and we have sat back and allowed them to claim our history, to relabel it, to represent it, and we have sat by. So we can't almost say only blame them. I have a responsibility now to spread that message. And not only here in New Providence, I have a responsibility in this community of the Bahamas, in this region, to represent workers in general. And that's not only those in my department. I have to look at women. I have to look at men, young people coming up, their education, their ability to make a living affects how the standard of living they have, expect them of a decent life in this country. It affects crime. It affects all that apathy. All that is tied in to work, labor, human rights, and how we treat people. So we have a serious responsibility that we have shirked. And as Madam President has told us, when she named me the chairperson, she told me straight up, she didn't mince her words, I expect a lot from you.
I think you put your faith in the right person.
And Ms. Wilson said to me, anything. Ms. Wilson said to me, if you do anything, I wouldn't send you it by memo. I will tell you to your face. And if you see Belinda Wilson on TV, you see she comes with a certain fire. But when you see her up close, the fire burns. They've put a lot on me, and they drag me to places I don't want to go. And they charge me in ways that forces me to step outside my comfort zone. But like they say, when they move off the scene, this next generation has to step it up.
Absolutely.
And it ain't about the iPods no more. It ain't about the pants around your backside no more. Because on that morning when we have difficult questions like name your terms, we have to have something to say to, just like Sir Randall said, we have the history that shows that we are people that can't be bought.
One of the things you need to acquaint and then we have to go to a break before it kills me, you need to acquaint all young unionists with is the fact that after the general strike on the 31st of January, people did not go back to work. See, nowadays you have a strike, you have an industrial action, people go back to work. January 31st, they couldn't go back to work. The hotels were not open and were not likely to reopen real soon. And when they reopened, those fellas were really not inclined to hire back the people that had walked out. The same at the airport. BEC, straight and plain, told them, you've lost your seniority. That's it. You've lost your pension, you've lost everything, you're starting new.
Right. So they sacrificed.
They sacrificed big time, but it was then that Sir Randall jumped in, and that is when the legislation started, and that is when the Alan Lennox Boyd came out from England and achieved 4 new seats in New Providence, and that is when the labor union legislation really got rammed through, and seriously, and this is all before 67. This is when they were fighting literally for their lives and the lives of all their members, because it wasn't like, and when people talk about the general strike, I know they're thinking, oh well, when it was concluded, everybody got what they wanted. No. They did not have a job to go back to. It wasn't like today. It was scary, and that's when Sir Randall really went into action. And to read the newspaper accounts of those parliamentary sessions after the general strike, because he went and had his own little demonstrations going on, because he was not going to stand for those people not being able to go back to their jobs simply because they stood up and stood in solidarity. And today, people got it way too easy.
Miss Dawson, I can't lose my day pay.
It's slipping away from, but it's
Simple as
slipping
that.
away. They don't see the bigger picture.
No, they don't see
And
the bigger
that's what's scary. We need to take a break, or I'm not going to see the bigger picture. We'll be right back. And we're back on Parliament Street. We are talking about a number of things. January 10th, the trade union movement. We're talking with Randall Fox, two of Randall Fox's children, David and Rosalie. We have with us Jennifer Isaacs-Dotson and Shalita Colley. Jennifer Isaacs-Dotson, of course, president of UTEB and the NCTU, and Shalita Colley, who is preaching to us today. Shalita is on fire. She is the chairperson of the PR committee for the NCTU, and I understand why. I believe Shalita was on my show a while ago, and
Labor Day, I think.
I forget when it
Labor
was, but
Week, wasn't
she
it?
was like, well, I'm not going to be able to talk well now.
Big difference.
Shalita was good then, and she got better. And she got better. But no, I think that January 10th, people look at it as a political day.
That's how it's been perceived.
But, you know, it irritates me. I tell people, this sounds strange, but when George Washington was president, he was involved in a number of big-time scandals, serious scandals, money going missing. He was accused of it when he was president. And as years went by, now he's George Washington, father of the country, and nobody knows about these negative things. And he's almost above politics and above all of this. So we're just too close in time to many of these events. But January 10th was so much more than politics. January 10th was a time when the people spoke in 1962, and the popular vote was for the PLP, but we all know what happened there. It just kind of got gerrymandered into the seats, just even though the PLP won the popular vote, and that could have been the January 10th 5 years earlier, but wasn't. But 1967 was the beginning, and I remember when you read about what happened, because the election was the 10th, he was sworn in, the government was formed in 4 days.
Yes.
That must have been a crazy time in your household. No, really. I mean, 4 days to, you know, it was. He had to make up his mind, and he had to, which I'm gathering from you wasn't a big stretch for him. Did he know? He probably knew what he was going to do.
In terms of, giving the vote?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that was an easy choice for
Yeah.
him, yes. Yes, most
yeah.
definitely, yes.
And then after Sir Lyndon was sworn in, the next thing, one of the first things he did was he went to speak to he made a speech at Lightfoot Key to the bankers and investors to tell them everything's fine. Because when you read the campaign rhetoric of that election, oh my goodness, these people can't run a country, and you know they're nice black people, but gee, you wouldn't want them to run a country, and they don't know anything about it, and it must have been. I mean, those fellas that got elected, I think probably about 10 of them had been in the House before. Probably not more than that. And they say that Sir Lyndon was 36, and they say that the average age of his cabinet was 42. And 2 or 3 members of his cabinet were younger than he was.
Right.
So these fellas that come in, these young politicians that come in, I think Ryan Pinder being the youngest, say, you know, what have you been waiting for? Pindling was your age when he was premier. He'd already been in politics for 10 years. Where you been? You know, these guys that are running today are a lot older.
Yes.
But are they more mature?
Well, politically mature.
Yeah.
Politically
when
mature.
I say mature in terms of their care, when you look at, they said in those days, in my grandmother's days, they only got an elementary level education. But they were, by the time they graduated, they also had a trade. They were more able to reason. They were more able to think critically despite the level of education. They knew what their place was, what was expected of them, and what they were to do. So even though we have a better education now, if we weigh it against the maturity level and the way, see, we train children today, oh, you're just a child, you don't do this, you don't do that. You were told, put a man head on your body. My grandmother said, a woman only has one opportunity to lose her dignity. And certain characters were ingrained in that generation that we seem to not be able to do, or we're not taking the time to do today.
Or we don't think it's necessary.
Or it is quite necessary because it is just as important as education, because it's a type of it, because it builds your character. Character mixed with your education brings out the true person.
And also being able to do something. I remember Jackson Burnside telling me that, may he rest in peace, and we do miss him a lot, telling me that when he was growing up, he knew how to do stuff. You know, like they knew how to handle a hammer and a saw.
Every man had a trade. They said it's a
trowel.
disgrace.
You know, you knew how to do things, even though that may not be what you were going to do for your living. You grew up learning how to do, and you knew how to play a musical instrument. You know, you were handy. Plus, you know how to play an instrument, even though some people were better than other people. And it was a totally different world.
I think, you know, I'm listening to the conversation and we're wondering, well, what is the difference today? You know, why were the people in the 50s and 60s, why did they behave in a certain way, and why is it not happening today? And one of the things about Saranda was he was a scholar. And it's amazing because today people are telling their children, you know, you've got to go and get a college education if you want to be somebody. Now, to me, I find it amazing that this was a man who never had an opportunity to get a college education. And his father was a stonemason and his grandfather was a longshoreman. And he was articled to T. Augustus Toote.
Right in this building.
Yes. Oh, in this building.
This was T.A. Toote's offices.
Yes. And my mother said that when she went to work for my father, one of the things that impressed her was that his wall, the walls of his office were full of photographs, great men, sayings, and so forth. And around the house, Dad had an aversion to anything domestic, you know, washing dishes, taking out the garbage. Oh, no. That was a source of contention. But nevertheless, when we would see him, he was always sitting at a table reading. And, you know, sometimes we would say, do you see all this work we have to do? You know, it was a large house. And why don't you come and help us? And he'd say, I'm thinking great thoughts. I'm a philosopher. And he had this regimen. He would watch the news at night, and then he would go to bed very early. And around 2 o'clock in the mornings, he would get up, make a large glass of Ovaltine, and then he would go into his library, and he would start to read. He was always reading books. And I remember the day when we were living through McPherson Street, when the Great Books of the Western World, that series, I remember when that series came into the house, along with Encyclopedia Britannica. Yes. And so he had this scholarship about him, and he was inspired by biographies and autobiographies. And so he was constantly learning. And I remember when he was disbarred, well, I was just about 2 years old, and he had to go to New York. And he went into some kind of voluntary exile. And my mother later joined him. That very thing, you know, because they saw him even at that time as a troublemaker. And so they had these trumped-up charges, and they disbarred him, and he went to New York. And he said he was toting ice in Harlem and working, you know, as an illegal immigrant. And when the immigration authorities would come in through the front, he'd go out through the back. But the very thing that was supposed to be his ruination, that was the time when he learned about the trade union movement, you see? And so he came back home. And in those days, he couldn't get mainstream newspapers to carry his writings. And so he joined forces with Cyril Stevenson, who had the Nassau Herald. And every week, he was churning out an article trying to enlighten the people about how the union could benefit them, you know. And so today, when you listen to the politicians, you know, they have, I guess, you know, tossing of insults, trading of insults back and forth. But he was in into serious education. My mother says he was trying to peel the scales off the eyes of the people, all right? And she said that they would come around the office and they would say, Mr. Fox, any church tonight? And he would have people like Marion Stewart and Florina Smith. These were people who, I don't know if they had even a high school education, but they would be the speakers. And I remember them getting up there, and they were full of passion and energy, and I had no idea what they were talking about, but I was amused because I'd never seen people speak and pray in this way. And so it was kind of funny to me. But nevertheless, you know, they had this education going on nightly. He was always out at nights with the union people. And so today you hear, you know, people talking, you know, is trade union movement relevant? Do we need it? You know? But you see, what they have to realize, the trade union movement was founded on a principle that we have to act collectively if we're going to bring about change. Alone, you can't accomplish anything. And it's still happening today. You know, and these are middle-class professional persons. You'd be amazed how much fear and intimidation you have on the job sites. But people are keeping quiet. Well, I got to keep quiet because I have a mortgage to pay, you know. Yes, and so they put a smile on their faces, but that smile hides a lot of unfair practices, injustices that are still going on today. And then what happens? One by one, they are picked off. And while Charlie is getting the axe, oh, I'm just going to be a good, you know, I don't want to say the word. You know, that word that you can't say anymore. You know, because, you know, I've got to, you know, keep my job. But the next time, it's going to be their time because they don't stand together. So the trade union movement is built on a principle. And any time you violate a principle, you lose. And so when you don't stand together as a force, you will be picked off one by one. And let me tell you something. I was on the job site for 28 years. Nothing has changed. There's still a lot of nonsense and unfair play and injustices going on. And the people are just smiling. All is well, but it's not.
I know. And when people do speak out, they are victimized.
They are.
And even when you speak out as a lone voice, you are victimized. But
this is something that separated Surrando from the rest of the people, because people don't know it. But I've been told that we came up when there was no food in the house. Relatives would send a tin of this and a loaf of bread for that, you know, and they tried. I have something here. I'll find it later on. But Surrando said everybody was trying to kill him, and they killed him in many ways, you know, stopped his cases from going to court. You know, so I think it's quite a miracle that we were able to get what we got in life, because at every turn there were people trying to stop, you know,
when you read,
to obstruct.
I was very, I was reading colonial records around the time of the 59-60, when it was decided, 58 to 60, when it was decided by the English that we needed the 4 seats. We needed 4 more seats in New Providence. And the correspondence back and forth between England, the governor, the Pindling, whomever, about, well, okay, the property vote. Okay, could the property vote, now the property vote, does that mean you have to own property in different constituencies? Could you own it in the same constituency? And when I tell you they split hairs, I don't mean just in half. I mean in 8ths and 64ths. They made any kind of initiatives that forward. So difficult. And I once said to Sir Linda, and I said, you know, when people talk about the struggle, I don't think they understand. It was just like these reams of correspondence about one little tiny simple point that they were not going to give in on, that they wanted to make as difficult as possible to achieve, to get to the one man, one vote, which is what you achieved in 1967, which is also very important to note. That was another thing majority rule really accomplished, is the one man, one vote. And everything was made difficult, and that was just because they were difficult. Now, when you have a character like Sir Randall Fawkes, who was known for not allowing people to get away with what he didn't think they should be getting away with, I can only imagine what they could have done to him.
Yes.
It wouldn't be very visible. It would be, things would happen to files and things would go missing.
Yes.
Cases would.
Well, during the general strike,
much like today.
Yeah. During the general strike, they called the house and they said, "We're going to burn it down. We're going to kill you and all your family." And so, there were the threats coming in from all quarters.
Yeah. And Sir Clifford has a funny story when he was doing national insurance, when he was introducing national insurance, and he says people used to call the house and threaten to kill him. He always used to say this to me, and he said, I figure anybody who's going to tell me he's going to kill me isn't going to kill me. So I wasn't too worried about those threats. But it was not a story. It was really happening.
Yes.
And these people's, you can say what you want about whether you agree with the politics of anybody, but these people were putting their lives on the line.
They put their lives
there
on
was
the line.
There was no question about it. And then when you throw in the into the mix the Freeport situation, which is what provoked the election of 1967 because of the articles in the Wall Street Journal that were being written about the mafia and the gangs and the things that were running the casinos in Freeport and blah, blah, blah. And those fellows don't play, and they had a vested interest in seeing that the people that were in power stay in power. So, this was not a fun time. This was rough. And the rallies were rough. I have people that, used to cover the rallies for the press, and they were rough. People's lives, well-being was in danger. And you can't tell this to kids who go to the rallies now. The rallies now are like rock concerts.
Entertainment value.
Exactly. It's a combination of a rock concert and
I always say I enjoy the campaign rallies because it's good comedy for me. I sit back and I'm just royally entertained,
Exactly.
But it's because we as an electorate don't demand of our politicians to talk about issues and to talk about what are we doing to advance the country. How are we going to set goals and objectives for the country for the next 5, 10, 15 years? And we as a people, how little we expect of politicians or people who are running for national office.
It's not how little we expect. It's how little we expect we can influence them. It's they're going to do what they're going to do. So who am I?
I think as Rosalie said, Sir Randall said that to peel the scales off of people's eyes, we're still at that point today. We're still trying to peel the scales of persons who work on the job, who have a union, for them to understand that it is important to be collective and to work together as one. When you have people on the job who are pulling and hauling against you, and you're doing one thing as the union, and they're out there talking to management and snitching and backbiting and backstabbing, that's even worse than it's just as bad as probably what was being done during Sir Randall times. But we as Labour leaders face that even today.
Oh, yeah.
You're out there as a union leader and you're up there saying one thing and agitating, and they go in the evening talking to management and strike a deal, and when you look they get promoted, and then you're wondering what is going on. Like she said, how many people in the banks, how many people in these offshore banks are catching hell? But yet collectively they will not to get together and join the Bahamas Financial Services Union and say, let's put a stop to this, because this is our country. We have laws that say this is supposed to happen. Let's demand that our rights are protected and that our rights that we have decent work in our country. These very simple things that Sir Randall those fought for, we're losing every day.
Yeah.
And people sit here and okay, okay, it's going to be all right. No, people, it ain't going to be all right.
And they complain about it too. When it's
They complain, but what are we prepared to do collectively? That's the important question we need to ask ourselves.
They're not prepared to be a part of the solution.
Think people don't realize how important the vote is and their individual voices and how much they have a right to demand of those whom we vote for, and what is all at stake. Because interesting you said it wasn't just white and black people during those days. I remember something I read about what Sir Henry Taylor said about the educational system. the reason the Burma Road riot came about was political, social, economic, all those types of oppression. He said, and they ensured it by ensuring that not just blacks were disenfranchised, they made sure that poor people had an inferior education. And he knew this because he was a family island teacher. He went around to the different schools and he found that they intentionally put teachers in the school system that were themselves illiterate. So they ensured that the children remain illiterate. And he said he went about and trying to understand why. And then when Sarandal checked it out, they said because of the economic situation, their limited education, their limited opportunity for certain jobs. He said parents, the choice was a child who's educated versus one who can work and earn for you to actually be able to eat. And that is how they ensured their way. And when they came to vote, when they had the plural voting system, some people could vote up to 29 times. They could vote in each district. They had property. So one man, when you go in that booth, you're by yourself. That's a power. You could do as you please. You could vote your conscience. But in those days, you had to swear before the clerk, the police, the representative for the person who's running. That's an intimidation. They cut that £5 note in half. You go in with half of it, and they know you're voting for because you're swearing in front of people. Yep. And when you come up, that's an intimidation tactic. Today, you have the power of the vote, and we do not realize how important that is. So the Henry Taylor said that is how he when the interesting people don't realize that was 3 white persons who started the PLP, and then they said he went around and he said not only were you being oppressed as black persons, but he said they were actually just oppressing poor Bahamians, and it cut across the line. So it's almost like that day was that time that period was pregnant with tension. Because when I read something Randall said, he said once in the life of every man and every nation comes a moment to decide. Absolutely. And right now in the Bahamas, going into this general election, my generation has a moment to decide where we want the Bahamas to go.
I believe this is probably one of the most important elections since 1967.
One of the things that concerns me, though, you're talking about people not using the vote, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a concern that I have about the caliber of persons who offer themselves to run for office, public office. Some of these people, I've never heard of them before. They have no track record. When Sarandal and those and Sir Lyndon went in 1956 into the House of Assembly, there was a track record. They had already accomplished something. They had done something. But people are now getting up and saying, well, in order for me to do something, you have to put me in the House of Assembly. And you see, I think people are not voting because they don't see anybody out there that excites them.
And conversely, the people that you do know about and who do have track records don't want any part of politics.
Right. Yes.
That's a sad thing, too.
Yes.
That's a sad thing.
But it's pretty rough out there. When you talk about running for office.
It was rough back then.
It's hard.
But something Mr. Fox had sent me an email, and something he said what most people don't realize about the politicians of the day in terms of the workers, and he was saying.
Right. What I was saying was that as politicians running, being a member of Parliament is about access. Access. It's about contracts. It's about influence. And many
power.
And power. Most of the persons are lawyers, so essentially it helps their law firms, right? Mm-hmm. If you feel to the greater extent that a politician is going to help those among us who need the help the most, the school children need an education. The prisoners need to be rehabilitated, right? The crime situation needs to be addressed. You will find that those things are not being done by the politicians. I said, look at where the money is being spent in this country. We are getting new ports, we're getting new airports, we're getting brand new roads, hotels, etc., foreign investment, new laws in terms of offshore banking. But what is the government doing? What are the parliamentarians doing about those that can least help themselves, right? And what are we doing about the next generation? As many employers would say, the people that you're giving us to employ are graduating from schools and they cannot read or write. And Shalita, in the emails back and forth that we have had, one thing that I would impress upon you was that the unions need a political arm, because you cannot depend upon the PLP, the FNM, nor the DNA, right, to
represent your
to
views.
represent the views of the common man.
Yeah.
Revolutions are brought about by common men, not by the elites, not by the middle class. They pay, and this is something that I think needs to occur.
May I just say something? Sometimes when I talk about Sir Randall's legacy, I like to quote his words
Yes.
as opposed to giving my own. And, a week before he died, he went into The Guardian, and he was all around. He'd always stop in to talk with people, and he was chatting with Lindsay Thompson, who was one of the reporters. And apparently, the week that he died, he was supposed to come back and complete the interview. And so she had the final interview with Sir Randall. And I have a few quotes here from that last interview. He said, "Parliament at this time is not striving for an outright Labour Party."
What year was this?
This is
context.
2000.
Thank you.
"We claim that any government without a legitimate and qualified representation from the labour movement cannot serve the purposes of any nation. According to Sir Randall, government has failed to satisfy the just demands of the labour movement, simply because they always treated the labourers as units of the stock exchange and not as men and women made in the image of God, who are entitled to an equal place at the conference table." And then he said, well, I'm just skipping along. He says, "My most solemn wish is for a government free of corruption and with workers' best interest at heart. Over the past 17 years, I have never seen a government or opposition that was incorruptible. All I have seen was the unlimited greed of both sides, and that really isolated me as a one-man Labour Party, not by choice, but by necessity." And then in 1988, there's I don't know if this magazine is still around today, Consumerism Today. I don't think so. The print is so fine, I have to take off my glasses to read this. But it says here, this is at the very end of the article in Consumerism Today, "What concluding comments, advice would you like to share with the people of the Bahamas as we wrap up?" And Sir Randall replied, "Form a Labour Party as soon as possible and fight for the poor. For God says in Psalm 41, 'Blessed is the man who helps the poor, for the Lord will be there for him in times of trouble.' So if you form a party, make up your mind you're going to have plenty trouble. However, if you stick to the word, you will succeed brilliantly, okay?"
And that was
those were his words.
how many years ago, and how much greater?
And this Consumerism Today was put out in 2001, but I think it was an article that they were just highlighting again.
And how many more poor are there today than there were then? Especially today. We need to go to the phone lines. Poor Out East has been hanging on forever. Out East.
Good afternoon.
Did you miss us?
Oh yes, I did.
How are you?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good afternoon to the panel.
Good afternoon.
Those last words, Patti, could be applicable to me, but I'll fill that in the coming week. I'll start my comment by saying this. When Jesus Christ hung on the cross and he said it was finished, the resurrection hadn't taken place yet.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people saw majority rule as an end as opposed to a beginning. And that is why it's similar to the civil rights movement in the United States of America.
That's right.
Where they got those rights, but they didn't understand that was just the beginning. The fact that you had to fight for something that is an inalienable right shows that the fight wasn't finished.
That's right.
And what we have become is the same thing we were under slavery, basically, where if you're afraid to die for what is right and fight for what is right, then slowly but surely your rights are eaten away because you won't unite and fight for those rights. And that is always, like I think Mr. Dobson was saying earlier, the unity part. It's a divide and conquer system.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on right now in Parliament, there are literally, and I'm going to address this very soon, there are literally criminals sitting in Parliament. And no fancy way to put it.
No, if you just ask them how many have filed their disclosures every year since they've been elected.
Well, the disclosure...
they're all, as far as I know...
That's not even what I'm talking about. The disclosure part is...
That's a law.
Well, I know it's a law, but I mean...
And they're in breach.
If that was just the problem, I would say, oh, fine.
Fine. Wait. There are not just some laws you could say, oh, that one's okay to break, and this one not.
No, I'm not saying it's excusable. I'm saying if that was just the problem where they hadn't disclosed, then I'd say, okay, yeah, that's... But we're talking about there's treason. There's giving away our boundaries without tabling it in Parliament. Okay? Mm-hmm. These are criminal acts. These are treasonable acts. These are unconstitutional acts. When you have a sitting member of Parliament who says, when he's confronted with corruption, with conflicts of interest, that, oh, I don't have to apologize for being rich. What does it have to do with a conflict of interest? This is where we are. And the persons, see, the problem I hate is that we, as a people, don't understand our system of government. Yeah. And don't understand that that entire Parliament is the government, not just the party that controls and forms the cabinet.
That's right.
And the opposition part of the government, which is supposed to be the check and balance part of the government, has failed to do its job.
Mm-hmm.
And if the opposition is failing to do its job, the opposition is literally being unconstitutional as well. And so we are at a point in our history where we are literally being told to our face, you know what? You are so stupid that I'm going to break the law in front of your face and you can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we are in this country.
Not you can't do anything about it. You won't do anything about it.
You won't do anything about it. And they're depending on that in this coming election.
That's right.
And so...
Well, they depended on people to be quiet after a while about Clifton Key and see what happened.
Exactly.
I don't always think politicians can read the public.
And even the hour court development, okay? Here's a question I'm going to put out there.
Sure.
If they had the water storage tanks out there, right, that they had to move to facilitate the port,
mm-hmm.
Who's going to pay to remove it and put it somewhere else?
Yeah, you need to ask that next week. That's going to be a good one. I'm depending on you next week now.
I'm going to have a press conference this week.
Okay.
I don't know if you got the little thing I dropped off.
No.
Oh, well, I dropped off something to you a couple of weeks ago, actually.
No.
So she probably never gave it to you.
Probably not.
But no, I'm starting a little political party.
You too?
Well, yes, I have to. You just talked about a one-man Labour Party.
Okay. All right.
And
it only takes one.
That's right. That's right.
It's imperative, it's imperative that we challenge the status quo.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's happening in this country, the question you asked is, in your monologue is, are we threatened to go back to where we came from?
Yep.
We have actually started to go back.
Oh yeah.
Because when you can have to walk into the bank and they ask you for all sorts of things for a loan. I mean, if you have the collateral, you still got to bring X, Y, and Z, and you're being charged 18% plus a bank fee.
Wow.
That's criminal.
Yep.
Okay, when a foreigner could come into your country, this happens every day in the bank.
Yes.
An American or anyone could come in this country and have money sent to them in American dollars and pick it up in American dollars. If somebody from a foreign country sends a Bahamian American dollars, they have to get it in Bahamian dollars. You ever heard any nonsense like that?
It's a part of the disenfranchisement of the Bahamian people. Another area where the banking system holds down persons, because if you look at it as I am an investment advisor, Bahamians can only invest in Bahamian dollars, and there are only 14 stocks, all of which are going down. But there's a whole global world out there to invest in.
We can't invest in the stock market?
In many currencies.
We can't invest in the stock market?
Well, not even that.
It is
you can't. How only? See, I'm all against anything that gives a right to only a certain sector of your society, where you can't have a U.S. bank account, but because I'm a lawyer, I can have one.
But I'm going beyond bank accounts. I'm going in terms of our ability as Bahamians to create wealth for ourselves. If you tell me that I can only invest in these 14 stocks, and by the way, even the Port Authority stock that is going to come down, I think will go down because of lack of liquidity in it. But if you're telling me you must invest in these items, but there's a whole world out there of global markets, emerging markets, right, that we as poor Bahamians cannot invest in, then that's a form of bondage, similar to not having the ability to vote, or women not being able to vote, etc.
Yeah, well, we have been. It's sad, and that's why I'm going to try to get involved, because
good.
It depresses me that we allow these things to happen. Like the government said the central bank has, I think it's 4% or 4.5% is the central bank interest rate.
Yeah, 4.5, right?
It was.
And the banks are charging 3 times that.
Is what?
They're charging like 4 times that.
Yeah.
And there's nobody's putting any pressure on them, and the people aren't standing up and complaining. I mean, there's one bank you go into, I won't call its name, where you go to withdraw your own money, and they charge you $1 over the counter.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
Yep.
But
I'll leave
it there.
You're going to be part of the solution then?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. All right.
So we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye. We're going to take a break. If you want to get in on the discussion, 356-4509, 356-4510. We'll be right back. And we're back on Parliament Street today. We are talking about January 10th. It's the 45th anniversary of the election of 1967, which must have been very interesting in that they campaigned over Christmas. Similar to Jamaica. Look what happened there. Threw him out. They were mad because that was one of the things they said. They were angry about having to campaign over the holidays. They thought that was very disrespectful. So they threw him out. So this is the 45th anniversary of that landmark election in 1967, when Bahamians, I hear the stories, and the stories are written that there are, around about 11 o'clock, you started to hear Junkanoo drums in the streets, and you started to hear celebrating, happy celebrating that people realized the election had actually probably gone their way, even though the Out Islands didn't report in until I think the next day or so. But they knew something had happened. A sea change had happened in this country. And of course, David and Rosalie Fox's father, Sir Randall, was instrumental in forming a coalition government. Lest you think the Bahamas has never had a coalition government. It was a coalition between Labour and the PLB. But just thinking about the arithmetic of it, you had 18 UBPs and you had 18 PLPs, 1 Labour, which made 19 votes on the floor, and the Speaker in a chair. Nobody could get sick. Nobody could go on vacation. No, seriously. Those fellas must have worked. They must have worked very, very hard, because when they called a vote, They had to be there because
No one could give.
one missing, two
One
missing.
Nobody can be sick.
The vote was swayed in that one direction.
Exactly. Because if one person on the PLP side had become ill, then it would have been tied again, and the speaker would have had to have broken the tie.
Right.
And let's not even think about two people being out of town or ill or something. That's why when Uriah McPhee died in February of '68, I once asked Sir Lyndon, I said, did you have a hard time making a decision between a general election and a by-election? He said, it was the easiest decision I ever made in my life. He said, we buried him, and I turned around and I said to the boys, let's go for a general, and that's what they did. He said, we felt that the people had seen in a year what we had done. We had managed to accomplish enough so that people could see what we were all about and what our direction was, and I felt that the people were really with us. And April of '68, they certainly showed that they understood what was going on. But this election of 1967, we've all been talking about January 10th it's a date. It marked a very important change of government. But I think we're all agreed that the changes, we're slipping backwards.
Yeah, I think what
Jenny?
the caller said from out east when he said that we need to realize that was just the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that is perhaps where we fell down. We thought, yes, we had arrived, and we did not continue to do the work that we needed to do moving to this point. So instead of realizing that it was the beginning, we thought that we had accomplished all that we needed to have accomplished, when in actuality that was just the beginning of the work that needed to be done. And I don't think that we continued that work, but I think somehow now the trade union movement is now beginning to realize that we need to do the work. We need to be there for the people. And as the leader of the NCTU, I think as the president, that is what I see the role of the trade union movement as being there for the people of the Bahamas, being there to be the savior. That's really how I see the trade union movement as being, because the political parties have failed. All of the political parties have failed the people. And I see the trade union movement as being the hope, the only hope that the people have.
What do you need to do? What do you need to do?
I think, as Rosalie said, and even what Sir Randall said, that we have to form a Labour Party. I was bitterly opposed to that when I first came into the trade union movement. But as I sat and I read and listened, I said, but there's no other way for us to have our voices heard unless we are in the halls of Parliament and to be able to make decisions. I was always the one saying, I don't care for us to be political, that we need to be apolitical. But we are political, whether we like it or not, because the things that we do in the trade union movement influence everything in this country.
And most countries actually have a Labour
Party.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think that the trade union movement is going to have to seriously, it's too late for this election, but I think for the next election, the trade union movement is going to have to form a Labour Party and to provide a better alternative.
Do you think, I know in the past with Keith Archer and those, the bone was thrown of the Senate.
Yeah.
Is that something you would be content with?
The problem that I have with a seat in the Senate is, am I really able to make change? I don't see that as something where I'm able to make change. I'm not
Able
there
to make
debate.
noise.
I can make noise, but I can do that as the president of the NCTU. And I will continue to have our voices heard, and like I said, to represent the people. But I think as a Labour senator, unless you are really going to be heard and your views respected, which I don't think that we're at in this country, because I sit on the college council and representing the faculty of the college, but yet the people who make up the college council don't respect when you have something to say as someone who works in the institution. That is a very, very sad thing, that you sit at that table and you say this is wrong because I work here. I know what people are feeling. I know how people feel who work here. And I'm saying to you, don't do this. But yet, because it's a political decision, the simple way of getting around me as the noise maker is, hey, let's take it to a vote. And because they've already had the other council meeting, then of course I'm outvoted. And what I'm saying is the voice of the people on the ground, the staff, the faculty, and the students are not heard, are not respected. not even in that supposedly democratic council that runs the College of the Bahamas. So that would be the same as being in the Senate.
You had, at one point, you had Bobby Clinton and David Knowles.
Right.
They were MPs, yeah?
They were MPs and they were in the Senate, I think.
Okay.
They were in both.
Okay. And that was...
And Leroy Ducano is also in the Senate.
Of course.
Yeah, but most recently, no political party has been inclined to even invite Labour.
Well, except for Shane Gibson.
To be a part of even the Senate.
Except for Shane Gibson.
Well, Shane, yeah.
And Shane went right from being the president to an MP.
MP, yeah.
Yeah,
but I'm saying he didn't go into the Senate.
No,
so I don't think Labour was even at that point invited.
Nor did he go into being Minister of Labour, which
no, exactly, which was you would think would have been the perfect fit.
I didn't ever really understand that because Sir Randall, of course, was Minister of Labour, yeah, yes. Minister of Labour, and Sir Clifford was Minister of Labour, and these people understood it. And
no better to run Labour except someone who is in Labour, who is in the trenches.
It's like Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. I would not put him in charge of works. He's tourism.
But look at it this way too. When you say they brought him in, you have to look at whether they want him in to advance the cause of workers, or they want him in to capitalize on his position as someone who galvanized support in his position, he would bring certain amount of support with them. What workers need to understand is no government goes to power without the support of workers.
Exactly.
It is impossible because workers are the ones who vote. Definitely. And we make up the bulk of the population. And people say, well, unions aren't political. I'm a member of the Bahamas Public Services Union. And I could say everything is politics in this country, and politics colors and touches everything. Mm-hmm. Simple things as appointment, everything is touched by politics. Even when you talk about our history, the reason history isn't taught in its fullness is because it's tainted and colored by politics, and we see it through our political lenses. And what we're talking about now in terms of the general strike, if it was a date, I think it wasn't a date, it was a state of mind. For example, I can't relate to anything beyond independence. I could go far as the 92 elections. Okay. I felt when the PLP lost. Yeah. I was still living over the hill. I felt it when the results came in and when you saw they lost Fort Charlotte. And I said to my stepfather that day, say, you're lost. Yeah. I said, you could feel it in the air. Yeah. So on that level, go back those generations, they could have felt it. That's why they were beating those drums. You feel change. If you are in tune with what's going on in your country, you can feel it. And this election here, change is in the air.
You could feel it.
But you can't call it. And what is interesting, they said, the PLP could have won the election in 62, but because of gerrymandering, they won so much percentage of the votes, but they only got
they won the majority.
Seats.
They got 10 seats.
Okay. But they say what happened is they say some of the women voted. That's right after
the women didn't vote.
They said no. They say what happened is when in the 60s. What happened is when Jeffrey John stood here around or something like that.
He was so handsome.
So they say so people are arguing now. Well, McCarthy's pink lips bring him certain amount of lip. I mean, as a woman, you could say. He is a nice looking young man. And they're saying, is it the same thing where people going to be looking at? That, or they're going to be looking at change, or is it that something new, or are they just so fed up with the other two?
Are they voting against rather than for?
Right.
See, that's
the problem. You don't win an election. The other person just loses the election, and then when you look at when it's buyer's remorse.
The trouble is, our political parties haven't embraced that. Our political parties, when they win, they don't realize that they won because people were voting against the other one. They think they've won because they are so beloved. No. It's just we don't like the other guy, and so behave accordingly, just like we didn't like them, we might not like you.
We as voters too saying the politicians are so greedy, but the politicians aren't so much greedy so much as we're prostituting ourselves. How much y'all gonna vote based on who can give me the next taxi plate? Who I can go to is give me the most ham and turkey. Who I can go to get this. Who I oven this with. Who I plate this with. Because he is give me his cell phone number and I can get to eat McDonald's with him and I could beg this favor next. So we have prostituted ourselves. We are saying that the politicians bribe and they corrupt, but are we not corrupt ourselves?
That is
when we are selling our votes. Well, who coming to me but they tell me what they giving me? you've sold your vote. You have given away so much of your personal when you reach the point that you're selling your vote. People have to realize how much and the sacrifice it came to for you to get that vote. And how much power you have in that one vote.
And especially in this country, because you're giving somebody 5 years.
Yes, a long
uninterrupted, clear mandate, do whatever you want. It can't stop you. Nobody can stop you. Nope. Can't remove you. Unless you commit a crime, and that's a little dicey. If you read the Constitution, there's some, even if they go to jail, they're really not always removed because it's really strange. But that vote is giving somebody 5 years of your life and your children's life and your country's lives to do whatever they want to do. So you better be real sure that you like what they're saying. Otherwise, you've just sold us down the river for 5 years.
And somewhere I saw it, I think Henry Taylor wrote it, he said, the reason they have not taught civics and the way our government operates is a way to keep people in darkness so they don't understand the power that they have. People don't understand our government system. They don't understand what it is or appreciate the power they have in their votes. And because they don't understand the system, what is going on, and because they've not taught them their history in its full context, people are so easy to sell it because they don't know what it's truly worth.
Well, the Minister of Education not too long ago said that they didn't believe in teaching the Constitution to high school students in the Bahamas because it was too difficult. Yes, they said that on in the media. I mean, it wasn't a personal comment, it was public. And I studied the Constitution of the United States when I was a sophomore or something in high school, and I couldn't go out and be a constitutional lawyer, but I had a nodding acquaintance with it. It's
they don't teach it because knowledge is power.
Exactly. Let's go to the phone lines. Papa?
Hey, good day, Ms. Roker.
Good day. How are you?
Thank God for life. Happy New Year to everybody.
Same to you.
And to you.
Okay. Talking about Ivy Dumont, that's the only Minister of Education who I know was a woman in the country.
Okay.
That's what you're talking about?
Yes, she was the minister who did say that, yes.
Yeah, that's a few years ago. I think she's a senator too and a minister.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was.
Yes.
Okay. I hear what the ladies them saying in there, right, Ms. Roker? Mm-hmm. You can hear me clear?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, that's good. They saying that people them might still be going to do the same thing, foolishness what some people was doing over the years, voting for as much harm and take you what you could vote. I think things changed now. Whosoever was saying that, I don't know if that's the lady who said she a part of the Bahamas.
Jennifer Isaacs Dotson, the president of the NCTU. You know Jennifer Dotson.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure if that's the next lady. Sound like one lady said
that was
that would have been me.
Shalita Colley.
Yeah, she said that, not Dotson.
Oh, okay.
Listen, miss, it could get bigger than that now. We ain't just doing that no more. If we don't like you, or we don't like, if we feel like, all right, let me give myself an example. I can't speak for it. I grew up in an F&M family who never was supporting the PLP. I grew up in a home when they see Celine and others on the TV, they say bad things. All right? And I just feel like, in spite of me growing up in a home with an F&M family and stuff like that, I really don't like the F&M party, the Free National Movement, the philosophy, the leadership, the styles, the personality of some of those individuals like Carl Beckley, Hubert Ingram. You understand what I'm saying? In spite of me growing up in their family and maybe my family being victimized by the PLP, I can't stand the Free National Movement. And people them think, well, Papa, I use myself for example. Papa only making us the Papa one contracts and the PLP. Listen to me. I could get the most contracts right now if I just support the Free National Movement or go around Hubert Ingram or support Carl Beckley. I ain't into that. I can't stand them. You understand? So this bigger than what harm and turkey and all that foolishness. We ain't into that. Hey, they get a rude awakening coming now. Not just the Free National Movement, all political parties, because some people, and we really can't stand some of these people, and they don't really put people first. But I talking about for me, I can't stand the Free National Movement. So if the PLP win and they don't make it better for this country, that's sad. In spite of all the promises they promising and all that they could do better and stuff like that, but wouldn't give the Free National Movement a chance, but they could give me harm in Turkey, they could give me contracts galore, boy, miss. Things change now. But you know one thing I want to say about the union? I support the union 1,000%. I believe the union is a good thing. I ain't talking about no leadership and leaders right now. Yeah. The meanings of union, to support them people. The thing what you ought to say, solidarity forever.
For the union make you strong.
Huh?
That's the quote, for the union makes you strong.
Yes. I couldn't finish it, but that I believe in that. And then that don't just go for union, that for any of who really support one another. Stand for something.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? But in spite of me supporting the unions, you know, every time I hear problems with the union, well, what do you name, road air traffic controllers or anyone, anyone make noise, and she call it making noise, standing for the people them rights, I try to ask questions. Well, why? Why we can't do this for them? Why we can't do that? I was talking to one talk show host the other day, Chrissy Love, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, Chrissy, they should give them people down by the airport, what they name, the custom officers, what they need. They be bringing in revenues for us, the air traffic controllers. I said, them people them should be able to protect, what the word is, demonstrate or protest. I say, what they name, the on folks should give them the rights to be able, if they ask them for permission to protest the right way. They shouldn't be treated like that, like animals. You know, they should be treated like humans. And she was right there saying, we need to worry. At least I don't know if she's talking on some of us, even on meaning that's how she thinking, we need to worry how some of them get 2 hosts and 3 hosts and all these cars in it. And I think that's a bunch of foolishness. Sometimes we don't know what sacrifice or what God blessed these people with or what turnover they do with a little bit of change what they have. We watching one another. That's why I say that to say this. See, we so jealous of one another and watching one another. We support one another. You see that BTC thing? I know all union leaders and stuff was down there, including my cousin Nicole Martin and all that stuff, right?
Yes, she was.
But y'all couldn't even march together when it was the Labor Day march. And then you talking I think the same lady say something about people say the union's political. Everything is political in this country, man. Everybody knows who's FNM and PLP. I mean, some of us may try hide and say we don't support nobody, we independent, right? But look here. The UN folks, why the UN folks always got to march behind the NTCU? Why they have to always run behind that party? Why did at least maybe they march with the PLP too? I don't know, but I ain't know about that.
He marched with the NCTU and with the TUC. He marched with both.
Well, I don't know, but I know most of the time we support where the Pin the Man go and the NTCU. I believe that's the name of it. So people them have we have at least we speculate. We feel like some of these unions they political. I like Obi Ferguson. Obi Ferguson might be a big-time PLP just as well as he be a big-time FNM. But I like how he stand for people's rights. And even when the PLP some power, I used to be calling him and saying, Obi, what happened, man? What happened? Why you got to get all like that? But he say he's standing for the rights for the people. So when you all talk about unity and solidarity forever, man, y'all got to march together, man. Stop this foolishness. But I mean, if it's about Obi and Pinder, move them on the side. Move Obi and Pinder on the side. I know Miss Daxon there now. Miss Daxon used a woman. Do the right thing. Get us to do the right thing. Get the union to understand. Stop marching separate places. Go one place and tell them so when you all speak, the governor listen to you. That's why they didn't take you all seriously. The Bahamian people wasn't really supporting that BTC things. I know you all being out there as leaders and stuff like that, right? But we ain't stand up the right way. We just stand up the right way as a country and collectively as the union in this country. I don't know. I know Mr. Hubert Ingram a little arrogant and just do what he want to do. But if we just stand up the right way, we could maybe we could slow it down or get them to have some kind of better understanding or make more than $210 million for that cash cow we Jones. So that's why it's coming to Ingram and Jones for some time. Y'all keep up the good work, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, Papa.
May I just interject here? He was talking about the fact that the unions are not united. We know we have 2 umbrella unions, and they do go their separate ways most of the times. And this magazine, Consumerism Today, the question was asked, Randall, the labor movement in the Bahamas is no longer united. What advice do you have for contemporary labor leaders in this regard? Randall replied, the only advice I can give them is that they have to study business administration, how they can bring the administration together without losing any power or sovereignty of separate unions. In fact, you said they are not united and asked me for advice for them. Well, they should unite and stay clear of these political parties, because no matter what they do, the political parties want to get on the bandwagon. And in getting on the bandwagon, they adulterate the aspirations of the labor movement and eventually they will destroy it. And, you know, every Labor Day, if you look at those parades, you see that there's a huge Junkanoo contingent. Now, Saranda was very, very much against having the Junkanoo groups on a Labor Day march, because he said a Labor Day march really was to show the massive strength of the laboring movement. And you know, he said it was about serious civil rights issues. And by having the Junkanoos, they have their place. Randall enjoyed going out to those parades. He was not against the traditional heritage as we know it. But he said Labor Day was a time to highlight civil rights matters. So what happens? You have the Junkanoo groups. You see people jigging up and dancing and prancing. They don't have placards, you know. They're not taking a stand. This is the time when the attention of the nation is focused on you, and you whining and twining up yourself. That doesn't make sense. So the thing is, and then another thing, you have the Junkanoo groups, then you have the Progressive Liberal Movement. Lots of the workers go and they put on a PLP T-shirt or an F&M T-shirt, you know. And I just don't understand the mentality. You know, you are to support your union. You are trying to strengthen your union. You're trying to give your union a presence. But yet you're politicizing the event or making it into a carnival. So I think Bahamians really need to rethink their position about those, about the Labor Day March. You
That's
know?
a very interesting observation. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. We need to go back to the phone lines. No, we need to take a break. Take a break? Yeah? Okay, we're going to take a break. If you're on the phone lines, please continue to hold. We'll be right with you. And we're back on Parliament Street. Let's go right to the phone lines.
And one of the reasons for that is that if you actually look, and I see about 90%, Patti, you could name me about 90% of the things that I hear individuals demand on the radio stations that be included in the Constitution is already there. And I hear during your speech, you mentioned the fact that we have no power for 5 years. And I would tell you the Constitution disagrees with you in that statement. The fact is that you have not, is because you demand not. And so clearly, the governance, the people, once recognizing their power, believe it or not, can, as a collective, come to government and demand that they come back with a new mandate, and which essentially the new mandate is a recall system for a general election. And so what happens is, I think, was important over the years that we were miseducated so that we would not understand the collective intelligence, the collective power that we possess as individuals to come together collectively and bring about the change, the very change that was brought about during 1967. So I think it's, you know, as you begin to move to more what is called a globalized Bahamas, I think it's incumbent upon the union to begin a process of taking back the country. Remember, we talk about the Progressive Liberal Party, we talk about the Free National Movement and the UBP, but it was labor in the truest and purest sense that brought about the change that we so willfully enjoy today. And so I think it's incumbent upon labor to go back to the platform, to that post, and begin to rebuild, re-educate, and re-empower the individuals so that they know that the authority, though Parliament possesses the power, the authority lies within them as workers, as employees of this country. And then they can begin to transition and begin, as they become owners of the economy, they'll begin to recognize even the workers that work for them, that those same workers can very well take back what is it that they begin to enjoy as owners of their economy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, basically what he said was that, which is kind of true, it's incumbent upon labor to start that education.
Yeah, well, that was the same thing that I was saying, and that is the reason the NCTU, along with the Fox family, is starting very small by doing the supplement, which I think is a small step. And Shalita, who's recently been appointed as a PR person, is looking at education. We also have the Labour College that we do education through. Yeah. So we do have a number of avenues, but I think a lot of times we need more full-time persons in the labour movement. That is a challenge. We need, as he said, to be, and that's what I said prior to us going even to a break, that the labor movement has to be the catalyst. The labor movement has to be the change that people see as making changes in this country. And I think we need to go back to majority rule and not see it as the end, but see it as the beginning. And that we need to continue the work that our forefathers like Sir Clifford and like Sir Randall did, and to continue that work. That is important. And for me, as the president of the NCTU, that is important, to continue that work and to do education and training and to be the change and to be, as I said, the savior that the poor people will be able to look up to, and to say that the trade union movement, if no one else is there for me, the trade union movement is there for me.
Because the trade union movement is me.
Exactly.
Is made
That's
up
right.
of us.
It's made up of all of us.
Yeah.
And we are the ones who make the trade union movement or break it. As you know, as the song says. Yeah. Solidarity forever, because the union. And listen, when you say the word union, it means everyone working together in unison, working together, not apart.
And not defending substandard work, not defending bad behavior, but working with the tripartite
structure
approach, government, management, union. It all works together, and that's how a society works.
But I always tell people see the union as being troublesome, being loud. I
always want more.
Always want more. And people don't know what unions do. I work at the College of the Bahamas, and I tell them, when you see me go public with a statement, and I've said this to Rosalie before when me and her have talked, when you see me come public, I've exhausted every avenue to try and resolve that issue within house. I never try any issue that I have at the college is addressed first with the president of the college. If it's not resolved there, we file a trade dispute. We go through all the correct mechanisms that we need to do to try and resolve an issue. But people think that the union doesn't do this. The union goes through all the channels that it needs to go through. And a lot of times, it's not the union that's being, disagreeable. It's management. It's almost as if the tables have turned. It's not unions that are disagreeable in this country. Right now, it's the management and the government of the Bahamas, whoever that is, that most of the times are the ones that cause the most problems in this country.
David?
Yes, I just wanted to say one thing on that. Change is not always pretty.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? If you look at the Arab Spring, right, it began by Tunisian youth who had to light himself a fire to bring attention to the inability for him to actually sell his wares on the side of the street. That one act sparked the flame of change in the Arab world. And so in the same way, you have the unions and their struggle in the 50s. And Jenny, I was overjoyed to hear you say that you were going to spearhead the forming of a political party, the Labour Party, because I, for one, don't feel like going to any of these political parties asking them for anything. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you look at where their funding comes from, you will find out where their heart truly lies. And look at where things are being done in this country and where they are not, right? And it is up to the workers to take care of the workers. A couple of points. Earlier on, there was the comment of the TUC and the NCTU not working together. This must change because, as you said, through solidarity, you make things occur. In Dad's day, there was the Bahamas Federation of Labor, which, by the way, was outlawed in the early 1960s, and he had to actually form a corporation in order to keep it going, and it was outlawed by both the PLP and the UBP. Right? So don't always think that the PLP is more labor-centric than the UBP. Also, look at what occurred in the 56 elections. I have some campaign literature here, and it had let us climb the ladder together, and it had a set of goals which needed to be achieved, and there are 12 of them in this campaign literature, and it will be in the Guardian supplement. Read them carefully, because you'll see that through the vision of the leaders then, all of these goals have been achieved. Goals such as a written constitution, labor laws, better representation of the masses, a court of appeal, a university, a national bank. All of these things have been achieved. Now, what you have to do, Jenny, is as you form this party and as the labor unions come together, you have to set up another set of goals to take us, the people, to the next level. Because I can assure you, it won't happen in this election that's coming up.
Yeah, one of the things I want to say too, I feel very strongly about the supplement that will be coming out in Tuesday's Guardian, because in recent years, I've come to the conclusion that we have got to get out of this victim mode and mentality. Look what they're doing to us. Look how they're treating us, etc. You know, the F&M government denies that majority rule ever happened. I don't see them doing anything. I heard some talk some years ago about a National Heroes Day and a National Heroes Park. Nothing has come of that. The PLP deliberately and intentionally omit the part that Labour played in bringing about change in 1967. And, you know, you tune into the radio stations, you listen to Perry Christie and those, they will call every name but Randall Fawkes. And, you know, this denying and this negation of history, it's appalling. And it's not coming from the illiterate, it's coming from people who are our representatives who should know better.
That's weird.
And so
what it is.
this year, it was one of the reasons why I asked the union leaders, let's join forces and start to educate people, because obviously if we wait for these political parties, they are burying the truth. And I want to say this. I have a quote here from Carter Woodson, who is known as the founder of Black History Month in America. And he said, those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished, they lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history. And sometimes you say, well, how did Sir Randall, you know, how was he able to do all of this? He was a reader, and he read the autobiographies of great men. But our people, the opposition and the government, are systematically burying history. They're putting a spin on it, and they need to stop. But as opposed to just sitting back now and crying and talking about what are they doing to us or what they have done to us, the labor movement, the Fawkes family, we're going to have to take the initiative, and we're going to have to start with the education.
That's where it begins. And your father and Sir Clifford and Henry Taylor and who else? A number of other people have written, too few have written books.
Yes.
Too few.
And I think
And the different stories told in each of those different books, and the stories and they differ, but they're all parts of this giant tapestry. I always say that, you know, you stitch them all together and that's the story from different people's points of view.
I think one of the reasons why history is not being written in this country is, you say, too few people are writing history. And in this country, it seems as though we have the idea that evil must be forgotten. It must be distorted or skimmed over. And that's why these people are going to their graves and they're not writing their memoirs. The people who made history, they're not documenting it because they can't bring themselves to tell the whole truth. That's the problem.
That's possible. That's entirely possible. But if they tell their truth, somebody else will tell another truth. And
At least you'll have both sides.
it'll all knit together. It does.
But there's a fear in this country, you know. If you tell the truth, you know, there are repercussions for that, you know.
there are definitely are.
Definitely repercussions.
There definitely
It may
are.
not
Power
last.
concedes nothing beyond a demand.
That's right. Thank you very much for being here. And Tuesday in The Guardian, the supplement will be out, so we all have the benefit of that. That's a keeper. And that is, please hold on to it so when your children do projects, you don't have to call those of us who have written books and ask questions. You actually have it for yourself. It's I always tell people I'm not going to give you answers, but I can tell you where to send your child to do the research, because I believe in doing research, and if the kid does research, they might find something that none of us have ever seen. So
They can share it.
thank you so much, Jennifer Isaacs-Dotson, Shalita Colley, David Fox, and Rosalie Fox. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And I'm going to call on you on Labor Day. I want y'all to come back on Labor Day and we talk some more.
Plans in the
Talk
making.
some more. Absolutely. I want you to stay tuned. Malcolm McKay is up next with Island Classics. I'll be back next week, as I said earlier, with the folks from the Arawak Key Port. And we're going to discuss that port and the public offering and just the port in general and exactly what's going on out there. I want you all to have your questions ready. Playoffs, whatever. But anyway, have your questions ready. You can TiVo the playoffs. Oh, I just talked blasphemy. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. There's a game on tonight. Enjoy that, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye.